Hey there, and welcome to another Factorio Tutorial Xterminator, and thank you for joining me. Today we're going over smelter builds. I did a video on this quite a long time ago, but it's obviously very out of date now, and the builds are kind of inefficient and not that great. So people requested I do a new one, and here we are. Now before I start, I do have another video on smelting ratios that goes more into detail on some things I will touch on in this video, but this one is more about the builds themselves. So I want to start on the left here, and this is my preferred build for early game and early to mid game for both iron and copper. It works for stone as well. It's just not going to work quite the same because stone, of course, takes stone brick rather takes 2 stone input, whereas the ore just is a 1-to-1. So how does this work, and why do I like it? Well, this works really nicely because it's cheap. That's part of the reason I like it. It's cheap, it's simple to make, it looks decent, and it's just really easy to carry over into additional phases of the game. So we have here a little splitter setup, which is allowing us to put ore on one half of the belt and coal on the other half. And this is really nice because this makes it compact and cheaper to make, because you don't have to have separate belts like on the outside or on the inside carrying coal or ore. A lot of builds may have ore on its own belt and coal on its own belt, and then you need an output belt, so it's like a whole additional belt, and then you probably need long hand inserters and such, which is just more expensive and just more of a pain to set up. And this avoids all that. Now, at first glance, you may be like, well, how's this going to work, because it's only half a belt of ore. But it's not. It's a full belt of ore, just as if you were to send a full belt of ore down the middle, or a belt of ore and a belt of coal down the side. Unless you, of course, sent 2 entire belts down the side. But this is taking in a full belt, and it's just splitting it 2 different directions, right? And then same with coal. And then the nice thing here is this coal can just pass through onto many smelter builds next to it. This will supply a ton of builds, a full yellow belt. And this is 24 furnaces on each side. Why 24? Because 24 will saturate a yellow belt. Again, this goes more into the ratios, which I covered in a previous video. And the very nice thing about this, why I like it, building it out to 24, is because this makes it instantly upgradable almost to red belt and steel furnaces, because it also requires 24 steel furnaces to fill a red belt. So all you have to do is just obviously replace the belts with red and replace the furnaces with steel furnaces. You don't have to build it bigger or anything, and you're good to go for an even higher output of resources from this. And it's just very cheap, very easy to build. So this is my preferred one, my recommended one. There's many others, of course. This is just my personal favorite. Now on the right here, we have a very similar build, and this one I'm using just to demonstrate if you want this to be expandable for electric furnaces. Personally, I would not recommend that. I myself used to do this, and I never do it now. I haven't done it for like over a year because personally, I find that when you want to use electric furnaces, it's best to wait until you can use modules and beacons with them. And the reason for this is electric furnaces have the exact same craft speed as a steel furnace, meaning they're not going to give you any more output without modules or beacons. So the only difference is they don't require fuel directly. So if you're tired of messing with fuel and stuff, you could upgrade. Do keep in mind, though, that it is kind of alternatively going to use more fuel, because if you're still on steam power, it's going to burn more fuel because they take more electricity. So keep that in mind. But this is just an example. If you want this to be upgradable without tearing up the whole thing, we've spaced this out a bit more so that you can basically just take out the furnaces and then these belts and inner inserters. You can leave these inserters in the outer belts as they are, and this main inner belt, and upgrade. I have a blueprint here of 24 electric furnaces, and you can see if we place this, hover over top, you would just, like I said, you would need to get rid of the inner inserters, the furnaces, and then that inner horizontal belt, and then you would just put inserters where those horizontal belts are, and this would be upgradable. Same with the length. This pretty much fits in the same space lengthwise. Okay, again, I would not recommend that. If you're going to use electric furnaces, personally, I would say just build a whole new build, which I will show over on the right. But now we can move on to steel. So this is actually recently my preferred steel build. This is a build similar that speedrunners use. Now, speedrunners use it because it's quick to build when you do it in the right order. Personally, I don't do it in the right order. and that doesn't matter to me. I don't do it necessarily for the quickness at which I can make the build. It's the expense put into the build. Okay. And the reason is because you don't need undergrounds and you don't need long-handed inserters. You can see here we're doing a little trick where we have the coal and coal here and coal here, and then we have the steel output on the same belt as the coal. You can see these inserters on each furnace, one's facing one way, one's facing the other. And this allows us to make it pretty compact, not need undergrounds and not need long-handed inserters. And then of course we have this outer belt here, which just goes down farther to kind of supplement because the ore wouldn't make it all the way down otherwise. We're using this trick, and this comes down, and then these just merge, and we're using a nice little filter priority splitter here to only get the steel out rather than, we don't want to pull the coal out. Now, this is not close to a full belt. These steel builds are not meant to give a full belt because you need an absurd amount of furnaces to do that, and there's probably no way you're going to build that big of a setup off the bat. This right here is about a quarter of a belt, a little more than that, right? So, not too bad. It's a little more than a quarter of a belt, like I said. And this one does about the same, potentially a little more. And I'm showing you this build just as an alternative. This is a build I used to use, and there's nothing wrong with it, except, again, it's more expensive. You can see here there's long-hand inserters, there's underground belts. This here is a build, and there's 60 long-hand inserters in addition to 64 underground belts, which is, a lot of extra stuff you have to make compared to this build. If we go ahead and just blueprint this build really quick, you can see this thing has 304 normal inserters, whereas this one has 240. So this one does have about 60. This one here has 64 more inserters, but they're not long-handed. The long-handed are an extra step. They require more materials, and then of course the undergrounds are pretty expensive as well. So there's that. And now we're going to move on to some beacon setups with electric furnaces. This guy here is one I recently used in my belt mega base, and I really like it. There's tons of different alternatives. This is not I'm not saying this is the best. There's tons of different ways you can do it. This is for inspiration, or if you want to use this one. This guy inputs 2 belts. We have 2 input belts here of ore, and so one here and one here, and it's doing some underground trickery here, to kind of bring this out and bring this back over. And this is also outputs 2 full belts of plate, as you can see here. And this works really well. So 2 full belts of plate, that's 4,800 items a minute, because a blue belt moves 2,400 a minute. And this thing is really, really compact, really nice. Now on the right here, lastly, we have this steel build. And this steel build will output a full blue belt of steel, and it's huge. You can see on the map, this is a steel build, and this steel takes a lot of stuff. So this guy comes down, and it's a little hard to follow here. I will be including these blueprints. I'll put them all in a book and put a link in the description where you can grab the book, so you can check it out closer if you want. But it's inserting the ore, so it smelts basically ore into plate and then plate into steel directly. So it's not like inputting plate. And this, all the way down, and then what we have here, we have some defenses. So this outputs only half a belt each side of this, right? Because these are only inserting onto one side of the belt. And then we just sideload. Sideloading works great in 0.16. So we just sideload to get a full belt of steel, as you can see here. Now it's a big build, but that's kind of what's required to, get this full belt out. And then over here on the right, I just want to show you one bot-based build. Again, there's tons, many different ways you can do bot-based builds. This is one I did in my 4K science per minute base. It's not on because it would pretty much require like all kinds of trains and all this stuff to really make it work. The production of this, I can tell you, is 24,000.7, so 24.7 thousand plate per minute of either iron or copper. This is not really going to work for steel, but again, there's many different ways you can do steel and stuff. But this guy here is almost 25,000 a minute, copper or iron. And the trains, it's set up for a certain length of train here, but you can use whatever train you want. The bots will just be a little less efficient due to bot travel, but if that doesn't really matter to you, you can just use whatever train length you want. Yeah, so this is a really, I like this build a lot. It's super compact, super efficient. in terms of inserters and bot usage. And it's just really good. Like I said, there's many other options though. So there you go. There's some builds. You know, if you're looking for some early game builds, mid game, steal builds, late game, whatever you want, here's some examples, some inspiration. Like I said, there will be a link in the description that will have the string for a blueprint book, which will include all of these builds, minus the creative sources, of course, that will get you started. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully this wasn't too long, but I did want to kind of explain the intricacies of each build. And if you have any questions or anything, leave them down below and I will do my best to answer. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.